Today I'll be talking about the women's movement. I have chosen this topic because it's a very broad topic and it also has many different aspects and things to it. I have separated it between the first, second, and third wave. There's a couple different time frames that each different wave has. Before we start, I would like to define liberal ideologies or liberal feminism, which holds that women and men are alike and equal in most respects. They have equal rights, equal roles, equal opportunities in society. This definition was given to us by Woods in our textbook. Cultural feminism or cultural ideology is the fact that women and men are fundamentally different and therefore should hold different rights, roles, and opportunities. So basically, it says and it states that women and men are completely different people and things, so we should keep them separated, and for that reason, they should have different rights in our society. Okay, to start, we will talk about the first wave, which started in 1840 and ended in 1925. First, we'll talk about the liberal ideology or liberal feminism. Here we had people fighting for basic civil rights for women. This was the start of the women's right movement. This is where we saw people starting to fight for the right to vote, the right to have a say in society, basically. This is where we also had this notion and this thing that people really started to say, and it was that women and men were created equally. For this time and period, this movement and the liberal ideology focused more on white women issues. Mainly all of them were middle or upper class women. Here we had peaceful nonviolent protest. And this is kind of how they would get their word out about their movement. Okay, now we'll talk about the cultural ideology. And here we had the belief that women and men had to believe more in a traditional societal structure, which basically meant that women belonged in the household and should stay at home, take care of the husband, take care of the kids. This is where we had the cult of domesticity. And basically, they wanted to end slavery, ban alcohol, and get rid of child labor because all this inhibited and didn't help the household. It didn't help have a good home, good family. So these were women that were still fighting for rights, like to end slavery, but it was for them to have a good home life, not necessarily for women to have the ability to be more free, but it was more to help them at home, which that's where we see a little the differences between liberal and cultural ideologies. Of course, there was still some anti-suffrage activism going on. There were still people who did not want the women's movement to occur, and for this, we call it the backlash against feminism. This prevented women from gaining rights. A lot of different protests and people came together in order to have this occur, in order to prevent from women to gaining rights like the right to vote. People thought that women should not have the right to vote because it went against a lot of traditional ideologies and traditional structures that we had already had in place for such a long time. And people just didn't think that women should get the right to vote because it went against women's natural role, which was to stay at home, take care of the kids, take care of the dad. Of course, this movement did prevail, and in the first wave they did have a great accomplishment, which was the addition of the 19th Amendment, which was added in 1920, which gave women the right to vote. This was the main outcome of the first wave of the women's movement. After 1920, they did have a period where they didn't really talk too much about feminism due to the First and the Second World War, just because they were focused on, fighting. Okay, so then we will move on to the second wave. The second wave started in 1963, and it's actually still present, and we still have a lot of things related to things that we looked at in the second wave still going on. So still the second wave of the women's movement is still continuing, and it has not ended. So we will first talk about the liberal ideology. Here we have a lot of different things. It's a little bit bigger than the first wave. So first, here's where we had the creation of this radical feminist, or the women's liberation movement. Basically, it meant just that women wanted to be free, wanted to have rights, and wanted to have the same opportunities men did. There was a lot of protests going on against the Vietnam War and civil rights. A big thing about this is that participants, anybody had the same right, and for this, the movement was leaderless, so no one had more power than the other in this movement. One of the biggest outcomes of the second wave in the liberal ideology was the structural basis of what we now know as women's oppression. So this is where we started establishing what exactly people wanted with the women's movement and what we wanted to look at. Here we also had the creation of the National Organization for Women, which worked towards political, professional, and educational equality for women. For example, we had a writer, Betty Friedan. She wrote The Feminine Mystique. And in here we had this book that started talking about a topic that nobody was really talking about, but it really started a conversation. It started this thinking that a lot of people had never really brought up, a topic that people didn't think about bringing up because a lot of people were against the women's movement in this time. But books like these really started to give women a voice and really brought up the consciousness of women. The movement was still focused on white middle-class women and upper-class women, but we also started to have the creation of womanism, which was basically the interaction between gender and racial oppression. So we started looking more at how gender is affected by race. So here we had more African American people join the movement, and also more lower and working class people and women who started to look at the movement and started joining the women's movement. We also had something called the multiracial feminist. And by this people started to look at how race, ethnicity, economic class, gender identity, and social orientation, etc., affected gender, and the fact that it's not the same thing if you are a white upper class female in society and if you are a black lower class female. So this is where we really had this consciousness of the fact that there are other aspects that do affect gender. And we still had cultural ideology. And here we had the separationism, and it's where women really wanted to separate themselves from men, wanted to just create this society where it was solely females and where women can really thrive. We also had the revolorism, where people believe that women should still look at their traditions and should still contribute to society, but they should still return to home. Just interesting. And then we still had, of course, an anti-feminist activism. We had the fascinating womanhood movement, which called for women to return to traditional values and roles. We also had this very big movement called the Stop Era, and it's just basically telling people that they should live traditionally and just go back to how things were before. By that I mean people told females that they should focus more on their home and their household. So basically in the second wave, we had people talking about patriarchy and the male and the female and how men had more power. One of the main issues was also pay equity. So the third wave started in the mid-90s, so not too long ago. This movement included all women from all different races, economic classes, and sexual orientations, which is something we had not seen before. Sorry about that interruption. But yeah, this is something that we did not see as much, and we had more people, more females and men join the movement. Here we start seeing the media being used a lot more. This is also due to the fact that we did have the creation of the internet. So people started using different ways in order to have that consciousness raising. We started to have blogs, we started to have social media things where they really called for action and started asking people and asking themselves about the women's rights and women oppression. We did have blogs such like feministing.com, and here people have found a way to really relate to what's happening currently in the women's movement. And here in the third wave, we also had the creation of individualism, which is basically something that really just focused on the individual, didn't really did focus on what is happening to one single person and what they can do in order to help, but it was very individualistic. So I didn't really focus on the big crowd, we focused more on the individual. This is also the big creation of intersectionality and how we use it today. And basically intersectionality, as we've all looked at, you all kind of know what it understands, what it is. But basically here we saw the recognition of the fact that women are different. They're different because women come from different races, economic classes, social orientation, disabilities, just depending on who we are, people are different. And people started focusing on the intersectionality of oppression and how intersectionality affects women's rights. Of course, we still have anti-feminist activism. We have a lot of books right now written that really don't support feminism. We have a lot of books that have been written that really abandons the quest to equality. And there's a lot of books that really support the idea that you should leave the movement and really should go back to your house, back to your home, and continue to follow your husband's ideologies and follow whatever he says. Well, here's my video. I hope y'all understood this. Basically, it's just the women's movement broken down in 3 different waves. Thank you.